We move on to item number 7. Hillary Dvorak on, what is this called? Downtown East. Commissioner Wynn, you have an announcement?
Yes, thank you, Chair Tucker. At this time, I'd like to recuse myself from item number 7, Downtown East, the design team participating in a program in which we are involved in 2 of the buildings on the PUD. So I will be recusing myself.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have a PowerPoint for us?
No.
No.
The applicant does, though.
Oh, all right. We want it all to go off smoothly. By the way, I think the packet you sent us must be a record for the Planning Commission. I had to bring my heavy-duty pack today to get all the paper here.
Sorry. It was so much I couldn't load it on the web either. So I'm going to show some, probably a few more diagrams today because the public, I wasn't able to get it on the web. It was just
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
too much information. Okay, so this is the Downtown East project. This encompasses 5 city blocks on the east side of downtown between the new Minnesota Multipurpose Stadium and then the Central Business District. I've given you a zoning map showing the 5 blocks, and just for reference how I talk about them in the staff report, these are the 2 mixed-use buildings where you have the office and the housing. This is the above-ground parking garage block. This is the, not part of the development itself, but this is the light rail transit station, the Downtown East Metrodome station, just for a point of reference. And then this is the standalone residential on that 1/3 of the western block of the 2 blocks that will become park space. So as an overall visual, this is what I'll come back to if you need a point of reference as far as where we are or what building it is that we're talking about tonight. So the first phase, and this will be a multi-phase project as we've discussed at a previous committee of the whole meeting for the northern half of the 2 mixed-use blocks, and then whatever type of development occurs on the south side of the parking garage, and then whatever happens within the park. All of those different amendments to this planned unit development will come before this committee, 2014, 2015, maybe depending on the design of the park. But the first phase is what you see tonight, what's in your packets. Just to give you some site plan information, these are the 2 blocks for the the mixed use projects. And they're mirror images of one another, the 2 buildings. On the ground floor, you do have the lobby space for the what is going to be a Wells Fargo office building. Between the 2 buildings, they're projecting between 5,000 and 6,000 employees. There are structured parking spaces located above the skyway level. Those parking spaces are for the residents who will live in these 2 buildings that will front along 4th Street and along the park edge of those buildings. The spaces here then in those residential portions of the building are for the commercial spaces. There's also going to be skyway level commercial spaces in these 2 buildings, as well as the loading facilities. And there are 4 full-size loading docks and then a compactor space in each of the buildings, so a total of 8 large loading spaces with 2 compactors. And the loading and the trash and all of those components will be shared amongst the different uses within the buildings, which are the residential, the commercial, and then also the office. This is the above-grade parking garage. There are access points along Chicago and then Park Avenue. The space here on the south side of the parking garage, that is that liner the anticipated liner development. As of today, the agreement between all of the different parties involved in the development are still working out who would eventually develop this. It's not, the development rights for this have not been and are not going to be given exclusively to Ryan. And so it's unknown what will happen in this space until the future. The area here on the southwest corner of the parking garage is the transportation not transportation corridor, the circulation corridor within the building, the elevator and the stair tower. If there are air rights granted above this development rights for above the parking garage, it's anticipated some of those core functions would be collectively used in this area. So this is the parking garage. And then the standalone housing building that is on the west side of the park. Through the RLS, there will be a property line division drawn in this area, and then everything on that side on the west side of the line, will be owned by Ryan. Everything on the east side, and then on this block where the Star Tribune headquarters building is currently located, will be sold to the city. So I do want to just show you in a little bit more detail some of this ground floor space. This is the mixed-use building. I'm only going to show you one, so just flip it over in your heads, and that's the mirror image. So you have the primary office lobby with vertical circulation to the skyway level of the building. You have designated bike storage facilities on the ground floor for bike commuters to and from the office tower, recycling area, and then your loading docks. And then obviously all of your vertical circulation to the 23rd floor is there. These are your elevations. This is the north elevation. We talk about some of the different components of these buildings throughout the staff report. Where you are seeing blank walls, that's where the north housing portion would be constructed, and so it is not anticipated that this would be a blank wall into the future. It's anticipated that that north housing project will come before you shortly, actually. So construction is not occurring while we have employees in the building, and so everything would be completed at the same time. These are then your side elevations of the two office buildings, and then the front elevation, which also shows that housing portion is here. And I apologize for probably what looks pretty grainy for you guys. But that is that. And so those are those elevations. That residential then for the mixed use portions. There will be the ground floor commercial along with dwelling units on the street floor. Those street floor, ground floor residential units will be loft units, so they will have a lofted living space within each of those units. These spaces are being built to be converted into commercial space if the commercial desire is there in the future once we have all of these employees and additional residential tenants living in the area. Above the ground floor, then there are 4 additional levels of housing, and then this is that elevation showing showing that building in relation then also here to the larger building in back of it. So here in the almost in the middle of the building is your residential lobby. So each of these buildings will have its own residential lobby. They don't share with the office building. This is then that commercial space on the ground floor, and then these are those individual dwelling units that could in the future be converted to commercial spaces. They could also be more like a home occupation type of unit where you have, I don't want to say live work because it's not really a term that we use, but a home occupation where you could have offices or small other small home occupations that could go in there. And then the housing, the standalone housing portion, we had some discussions at Committee of the Whole last time about how this building interacted with the proposed park. Since that committee of the whole meeting, we had 1 or 2 meetings where we talked with city staff and also the developers. What has changed in the building is this 2,000 square foot space along with this 700 square foot space has been converted into what they're calling a retail or amenity space. So, and then if you can imagine, the parks is, here on this side of the building. And so that retail commercial space would have eyes on the park. It would have access off of 4th Street. It's my understanding that this 700 square foot space could either be part of that retail space or it could still remain part of internal building functions. This then is the elevation along the park. This is where that 2,000 square foot space has been designated for retail amenity space. This is the front of the building facing 4th Street, where you also then have the main residential lobby. And as we discussed, the residential lobby in this building has the leasing office, the mail facilities, and all of those. And then the club room and the fitness center are in this building, and all of those other residents in the 2 mixed-use buildings would come through this main door to access those amenities within the building.
Before you take that away, could you discuss the rest of the park facade there on the ground floor?
Yes. So just going back to the floor plan, so you have this retail amenity space, the amenity space. Within the building, then once you get, these are the stair and elevator towers, so because of the grade change, they've put that transition in this location. So this part of the building, then you're at a slightly higher elevation. Here is the fitness center within the building, and that's for the residents of not only this building, but the other 2 residential components. And then you've got dwelling units facing the park. And all of these units, along with the fitness center, have an outdoor, they have outdoor individual balconies with stairs walking down to a sidewalk that is on their property, leading out to the streets.
Oh, how high are those balconies above ground level? I see it slopes, but...
Yep, and so here's that elevation. You're between 2 feet and 6.5, 7 feet once you get down to the far north end of the building. If I remember my window calculation plan, I don't think you hit 4 feet until somewhere in this bank of windows. So everything from here back meets that window requirement that we have. And so that's the grade change. So in addition to the retail, you do have the eyes on the park, if you want to say, from those housing units. You also have all of the dwelling units and obviously up above.
Now, perhaps the applicant will have drawings that show that relationship between the ground floor and the park a little more detailed or larger scale.
And this was one of the elevations, or one of the renderings, that was in your packet. This kind of came at the 11th hour before things went out, but this is showing that 2,000 square foot space on the ground floor, and so then this is starting of the park. There was one other rendering in your packet that showed that full elevation. I just didn't print it out for today. So then for the parking garage, for orientation, this is Chicago Avenue and then Park Avenue. So your circulation in and out of the garages are on those 2 streets. That future liner development would occur in this location. This is the internal circulation area, an elevator lobby for the garage. And then these are your elevations of the parking garage, and the areas that are very dark, and I don't know if you can see the vines growing up them. These are the areas where the green screens will be located, or the living wall system that is proposed on this garage. And then this is that north wall of the parking garage the south wall of the parking garage that faces the park. And then this is that elevator circulation lobby. Just one more set of plans to walk you through. This is the Skyway plan. We have the Skyway would start Modifications would be made to the interior of the Hoff Garage at the Skyway level, obviously, would cross over Fifth Avenue, would go through the mixed-use building, cross over Portland Avenue, weave through the mixed-use building, and then eventually connect to the parking garage in this location. It is anticipated that the Skyway would continue all the way down, or all the way through the parking garage, excuse me, and then into the new stadium. How that looks and would work hasn't been worked out yet. So that's the Skyway plan to date. Ryan has met with the Skyway Advisory Committee, which have rules about how to design Skyways, Skyway hours, Skyway signage, things like that. They have given conceptual approval of that plan. And then once more details were available, they were going to go back for another visit with them. So your three applications.
Let me just see. I think Commissioner Cohen had a question at this point.
Yes, I'm confused about something here.
Okay.
Reading the prospectus, at the bottom of page 2, it says the MSFA and the Ryan companies are still negotiating the terms of the sale of this block. Who owns it now?
The Star Tribune.
And two other parties are negotiating the price of a sale owned by a third party. Is that correct?
No, and I'll give you the high-level explanation, and I'll let the applicant answer. Ryan Companies will be purchasing all 5 blocks from the Star Tribune. The terms of that exact sale, I don't know. All I know is they have to buy all 5 of them at one time. Then Ryan Companies will negotiate with the MSFA for the sale of the parking garage block to them.
Didn't the city own this at one time? Or am I confused?
No, the city at one time owned the parking garage under the downtown east block, which the MSFA did just purchase from Aladis.
Okay. All right. I still find it unusual that two parties that don't own a property are negotiating a sales price for a third person. It doesn't
and maybe
strikes me as something I'm not familiar with.
Maybe it's just the terminology that I use, but I'll let the applicant clarify once you open the public hearing.
Okay.
So the applications before you tonight are conditional use permit for the first phase of a planned unit development, site plan review, and then a registered land survey. We are recommending approval of both, subject to several conditions. And what I'm going to do, my presentation is a little bit different than I usually do. I'm going to go through the conditions of approval along with alternative compliance, as they all come together then in the very end of the report, obviously, for those recommendations. So for the conditional use permit, one of your findings talks about that the use would not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity, will not impede the normal or orderly development and improvement of surrounding property. We have 2 conditions of approval that come out of this finding. One deals with the parking garage and one deals then with the design of the skyways. The first condition deals with the parking garage. Yes. The zoning code, not Chapter 530, not site plan review, but the Chapter 549, the downtown districts chapter, has a requirement that on the ground floor of parking garages, unless you have access into and out of the garage, that you have commercial uses, active uses, hotels, or residential. The parking garage has been designed to have 2 spaces that could be converted to such active uses in the future. We, as a condition of approval, are recommending that the space along Chicago Avenue that's been called out as future commercial, that it be built out to accommodate future commercial from the get-go. So that's the first condition of approval that comes out of the CUP. The second one then deals with the Skyway, and that has to deal with the Skyway coming out of the Hoff Garage. Oops. So as you can see, and after talking with Ryan, it's maybe just over-engineered initially in these designs. I think that could be the right way to say it, right, Dan? What it shows here is a very large column supporting the Skyway and the Hoff Garage. What the city has been told is that the garage was not structurally designed to accommodate a Skyway in this location, and so in order to support it on this side of the ramp, or on this side of the block, excuse me, that support column would need to be there. Just as a different drawing, this is what that looks like. So, after conferring with the applicant last week or the week before, I believe that we have about a 10 or 11 foot sidewalk. So the condition that we've written, and this is condition number 3, President Tucker, is that that the Skyway be designed either without a structural column, and that the structure will be built into the design once they get further into the engineering of the Skyway, or if that is not possible for structural reasons, that the structural column be designed so the sidewalk has a minimum unobstructed width of 8 feet. The applicants took me on a virtual tour of Skyways with columns in it downtown, and there are many. I will say that there are many columns supporting Skyways in our right-of-way. None of them, I don't think, are 4 feet wide, though, which is what is shown in the plan. And like I said, I think it was just over-engineered, and so that's why you have that condition of approval in here, so we don't narrow our sidewalk down to 4 or 6 feet. The bulk of the conditional use permit has to deal with the planned unit development, which is obviously what the conditional use permit is for. And so I have just pulled out the amenity table that's in your staff report. I hope that's a little more clear for you guys up on your screens. They need to provide 20 points worth of amenities for the planned unit development, 10 points just to construct or be awarded the approvals for the PUD, 5 points for building height, and then 5 points for on-premise signs. One of the mixed-use buildings, this mixed-use building is located in the B4N zoning district. This mixed-use building is in the B4S-2. There's no height limit here. There's a 10-story height limit here. They're identical buildings. So they need to provide 5 points worth of amenities to construct the building in the B4N zoning district, which has that 10-story height limit. Per the zoning code and floor heights, the building that's going to be built is 23 stories or 300 feet, 6 inches. The other exception to the zoning code rules that they are asking for deals with signage. This is their overall sign plan. Not all of these signs need an exception from the zoning code. In fact, many of them do not. But just overall, this is where their proposed signs are, and this was obviously in your packets. The signs that need the exceptions are the 4 wall signs that sit approximately 200 feet above grade. These are on the south and the north sides of the mixed-use office buildings. So that is the park side of the building, and then this is the, I would call it the river side of the building. These 2 signs face the St. Anthony Falls Historic District, which is located along the river. These also face the 2 historic buildings, which were on the other side of 4th Street. As part of our conditions of approval, we're recommending that you not approve these 2 signs. We are recommending that you support and grant approvals for the 2 signs facing the south, facing the park. But because of the historic district and our national and locally designated buildings, we're not recommending approval of these two signs. The other two signs then that need exceptions to the zoning code through the PUD are the two freestanding signs. They're over 32 square feet in size. They're 64 square feet. Only one per block, which is allowed, but it's the size limitation on those that's triggering the request for the exception. The only other signs then that I would point out that I know will be brought up tonight are the two roof signs. These are the signs that are proposed to be painted onto the roofs. We don't allow roof signs. They are prohibited sign type in our zoning code. Our zoning code does not say if it's painted or applied or constructed or built. It just says roof signs are prohibited, and so we have interpreted that to be these two such signs. So one of the conditions is that roof signs is prohibited. It's just reiterating what our zoning code already does. So those are so they need those 20 points worth of amenities in the zoning code. The amenities that they're proposing then to provide are points for LEED, outdoor open space, the plaza, energy efficiency, a living wall system, which is on the parking garage, a shared vehicle, enhanced stormwater management, and then the recycling storage area, which is probably our most popular amenity to date for all developments. So they requested, and you can see, and I'm going to just point out a few things in the table. When they totaled their points, they said that they are asking for 23 points worth of amenities. When staff went through and evaluated everything, we come up with 27 points of which they are proposing, and one amenity we're not even actually granting them points for. So for LEED, they requested 5 points, and I'm sorry, I should have highlighted that one. I think I missed it because it was the largest row on there. They were requesting 5 points because the entire development isn't meeting LEED. The housing components in the parking garage are not meeting LEED. However, 77% of the overall development, when you just look at how much construction, how much building is going to be built compared to what's part of the office building, which will meet the LEED, we are recommending that you grant 10 points worth of amenity points for that. For the outdoor open space, they were requesting 5 points. We're recommending 0 points on this one. They are providing a large amount of open space, which is the park space that's going to be used as a public park. However, all they're proposing to do is seed and or sod that area. So it doesn't meet any of the amenity requirements. They're not providing the seeding and the landscaping, all of those other requirements that are needed. So we're not recommending that you grant any points for the outdoor open space. For the plaza, they had requested 3 points. We are recommending 5. This is where the design team and staff did our numbers differently. They were looking at the total square footage of 5 blocks downtown and then subtracting out what was actually plaza space. We looked at it just as the 2 blocks where those plazas actually are located. So the 2 blocks, the plazas, I should maybe back up. The plazas are located outside of the office lobbies. So this is one of the plazas, and then this is the other plaza. Again, they're mirror images. They're just over 4,000 square feet. They meet all of the standards that are required for a plaza in our zoning code. And on just those lots alone, they're 34% of the site. And what's required is 10%. So we are recommending that they get the 5 full points worth of amenity credit for this amenity. Energy efficiency then. Within the buildings, they had requested 3 points, and we're suggesting 3 as well. They are going above and beyond what's required of this amenity, and they're also going above and beyond what's the minimum standard for LEED. LEED requires a 10% energy savings. They're going for 40 to 50% in energy savings, and so we are recommending that they get full credit for this. The living wall system, they had requested 1 point. We are recommending that you grant 3. subject to two conditions, President Tucker, which are numbers 7 and 8 of the conditions of approval. One is that what they did on the living wall is they took the largest wall, which is let me just get my bearings down, which is the 3rd Street side of the parking garage, which I'm sorry is this elevation. And I just want to make sure I have the right straight. So you need to do 60% of the wall. What they did is they took that 60% and spread it across the 3 different sides of the building. So like I said, everywhere where you see the green, the dark gray on your elevations is where those living wall systems will be, and they'll be irrigated. Here's that other elevation. We're recommending that you give the 3 points for that. And I think their 1 point versus 3 point might have just been an oversight, but we are recommending full credit for that. Subject that they meet the square footage allotment, they increased the height of the ramp and didn't add any green screen or living wall system to that additional story. And so if you subtracted out that level, they met the requirement, the 60%. But once they added the floor, that their percentage fell below. So I'm just adding a condition that they meet the minimum required. And then I'm not a landscape architect either, but I Googled the vines that they're proposing to use, and none of them, at least not that I could find in my research, showed that they were going to maintain greenery year-round. And so I'm adding a condition that they pick a species of vine that has color or green foliage during all seasons of the year. I don't know if there are any, but I'm getting there probably isn't, but it's a requirement of ours, so maybe we can all talk about that once we close the public hearing. They are going to be providing 2 shared vehicles, so they get points for that. Enhanced stormwater management, they are proposing to do a series of rain gardens in the right-of-way. I apologize, I didn't copy, my overall landscaping plan, but in the right-of-ways, and it's also along the parking garage block, they are proposing rain garden areas for stormwater runoff purposes from the public sidewalks and that increased sidewalk space that's in front of the residential. And so we are recommending that you grant those amenity points. I believe it's the one enhanced landscaping. They're not, the requirement is above and beyond 530, and in the downtown zoning districts, you're not required to do any landscaping if your building's over 50,000 square feet. So they're providing, I believe it's about 20,000 square feet of landscaping on site in addition to the park. That's obviously not including the 1 2/3 of green space for the park. But around the buildings, there's an additional 20,000 square feet of green space. So we are recommending that you give the point for that. And then for the recycling storage area, all 3, the 2 mixed-use buildings and the standalone housing building will have shared recycling storage areas. And so we're recommending that point. So when you total everything up, you come to 27 points. And then we have, with those conditions of approval that pertain to that. And President Tucker, I would say that actually the conditions of approval that deal specifically or relate back to the PUD are conditions 4 through 8, excuse me. The other conditions then under the CUP is one, just a condition that the future areas where we don't have a development plan, that those be seeded or sodded, that the parkland obviously be seeded or sodded, and then the 2 conditions that dealt with the signage. So then the last application then is the site plan review, and we're recommending approval of that application subject to a number of conditions. Many of them are our standard conditions. Condition number 4 deals with mechanical equipment shown between the mixed-use buildings and the side streets, and then also with the standalone residential building. So the mechanical equipment, and they're working with Excel right now on the location of that. It's either going to go underground, or they are showing an above ground location in these 2 areas of the building, and then there is mechanical equipment shown in these 2 areas. And if it's decided between them and Excel that this equipment is or needs to be above ground, then we want to see it screened either through decorative fencing or decorative materials or landscaping. So that's condition number 4. Condition number 5 deals with the park housing block specifically, and along 5th Street, so across from the 5th Avenue, thank you. Yes. 5th Avenue, there are those housing units there are 5 housing units along 5th Avenue. These 3 housing units are shown with walk-up units. We just want to ensure that those walk-up units remain into the future, and so we've made that a condition of approval. Those 2 additional units I did discuss why those 2 units didn't have walk-up units, and there's an underground ventilation area here that prohibits them from having openings in those locations with such close proximity to that ventilation system, and so that's why you don't see these 2 units with walk-up units, but these 3 units can have those. And then the last 2 then come out of the alternative compliance, and one just has to do with the building placement. There were 4 areas that needed alternative compliance. One was building placement. Most of the buildings are located more than 8 feet. However, what we're getting in lieu of having the building within 8 feet is increased sidewalk width, which is very important downtown, plazas, landscaping, the rain gardens and whatnot. And so we are recommending approval, or that you grant the alternative compliance. And the condition of approval that came out of that is that that the buildings be built where shown on the plans today, since they are more than 8 feet. They needed alternative compliance for areas of the building that are over 25 feet, and I go through exactly where they are in the different buildings and why. The one condition, though, is that the the access to the underground garage and the standalone residential building, there's 2 short-term spaces and then a loading space in here. This wall appears to be blank. The applicant and I spoke today about this, and it probably isn't blank. It was just hard to tell from the elevations, but just to ensure that we don't have a blank wall since it is set back from the street, we made that a condition of approval as well. The other 2 areas then that needed the alternative compliance were the percentage of windows, and I would point out that on the 2 mixed-use buildings, it does seem like a low number. It was 11% on Park and Portland Avenues. However, if you add in the 3 large entrances into the building, the window requirement, or the window percentage, is just windows. It doesn't include doors. And they have 3 large doors on those sides of the building that are all glass. And so if you include all of the glass in those doors, revolving and non-revolving, normal doors, pedestrian doors, sorry, you get to 27%. So I did want to just point that out. But we are recommending approval, or that you grant alternative compliance for that, excuse me. And then the last area where they did not meet the alternative compliance is we had some sides of the buildings that didn't meet the 70% active functions requirements. And those really dealt with the sides of the building that had the higher non-active functions were the sides of the buildings where those where the back of house operations for the buildings are located, the bike amenity rooms, the recycling and trash areas, and then also, most of that elevation is taken up by the loading bay. But we are recommending that you grant the alternative compliance for that. So that is the whole staff report summarized for you, and that covers all of the conditions of approval that we are recommending. And I'm here if there's
And we
questions.
do have a plat as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you need to talk about it, but that is a third application.
I probably don't. It's really just, lots 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 1, 2. So
Okay.
that's it.
Let's see if there are any questions of staff at this point. Commissioner Slack?
I have a couple of questions. Hopefully they're all related. Starting with a larger contextual of the site, and some of the graphics show the vacant lot or whatever it is now that's directly, I think that's northeast of the new stadium. Is that something that we're going to see as part of a future development proposal? Because I think there are some graphics in here that show a building footprint on there, the further back you get into the package.
Are you talking about over here?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, this is land that's owned by the Wilf family. As part of the stadium approvals, that is where, at the time, an above-ground parking garage was going to go or is going to go, and it's either going to remain surface parking or there will be an above-ground parking garage, but it's not part of this planned unit development.
So tied in with that, you made a point, I think it's under the CUP item number 2, that some sort of commercial, residential, office, hotel use be located along Chicago Avenue. Is there specific reasoning for that location versus something on 3rd? My only point is that based on some of the graphics that are in here and the fact that it's owned by the Wilfs, long term, I do see some sort of parking structure there. And if it's not a parking structure, then it's a surface parking lot. So subsequently, we're going to have, over 2.5 blocks probably of parking along that edge. So was there any thought that maybe that first phase of development associated with the parking ramp be on 3rd versus Chicago?
No, honestly, the way that it will be built is that there could be future commercial on 3rd Street as well. Our comp plan policies in the Chicago Avenue is a designated commercial corridor in our comprehensive plan, and we have policies both in the comp plan and then also in the Downtown East North Loop Master Plan that talks about commercial uses along Chicago Avenue and concentrating them there. Neither of those plans talk about concentrating commercial uses along 3rd Street. On the flip of that, we have zoning code policy or regulation that says ground floor of parking garages everywhere, regardless of where they're built, should be. Not knowing what the market will be like for commercial, given the history of this area for so long, and with the new stadium here and then 5,000 to 6,000 employees 2 blocks over, we felt that it was important to follow the comp plan and the Downtown East North Loop Master Plan policies about putting that commercial on Chicago first, and then letting the market dictate when it will be when the market could handle additional commercial on 3rd Street.
Makes perfect sense. My thought is that if we're requiring them as part of this submission to put in that use, that maybe it should be best located on Chicago and 3rd, because that's going to be a blank facade for a long time. And you're right, it's going to be market driven, but I envision, that could be 5, 6, 10 years down the line when we get any sort of infill on that side of the parking ramp. So, I think that that's something we want to consider. How much potential square footage of commercial office mixed use is being proposed on the 4th Street side of the parking ramp?
Here?
Yes. How big of a space is that?
How big is that lot? I can't tell. I have it in my other plans. I'm not.
Presents about an 8,000 square foot plate. So about 40,000 or 440 units of housing is what's in the comparable space on the other block.
Okay. The next 2 questions relate to the park residential. The term or definition, and I appreciate that the applicant has taken some of the comments that we made at the COW and has at least located, some of the ground floor uses for some sort of commercial use. But my problem is in the plans, it identifies it as future commercial, retail, and or amenity. And do we have a definition of amenity in our ordinance that ensures that it's going to be commercial or retail, or is it going to be a building amenity at some point?
We don't have a definition. If I think that could be a condition that the Planning Commission could add to the approvals tonight if you wanted to call it out specifically as retail, or our zoning code would call it retail sales and service uses or commercial uses.
And then the last point, related to the park, on some of the park plans, there's rain gardens being proposed, I believe, along 4th, most of the lineal frontage along 4th. Is that to support the development, or is that to support just the big open green fields at this point?
No, and I don't have copies of this.
It's like page 452 or something like that. I'm joking.
Well, the copy center numbered them for me. I stopped counting. No, it's not. That would, and I don't know if the rain gardens are actually going to be put in, because the park implementation committee that's been formed and is working on what this park should be. I don't know if they would want rain gardens there. What's in your packets, it's part of the civil set of plans, so maybe back up 100 or so pages closer to the beginning of all of the drawings. This piece of infrastructure is a tunnel that connects the two existing Star Tribune buildings. I don't talk about this in the staff report because this really is a public works issue. We had a meeting at noon today to talk about this in a little bit more detail. This is a tunnel that was used to get paper between the two buildings. It was the council back in 1969 adopted a resolution that allowed this to be constructed. The applicants are proposing to waterproof this and use this as an underground storage stormwater cistern, that would be used to irrigate, the landscaping on the building sites, and then also irrigate the park. There are some things that need to be worked out between Public Works and the applicant. We had a meeting today. There was going to be another conversation this afternoon with the Director of Public Works. I don't have a resolution. I didn't hear if there was any resolution that came out of that. Maybe the applicant can speak to that. But that's the stormwater plan right now. If in the future being before December 1st, if that's not, if the city and the applicant can't come to terms on this, different stormwater systems for each block will have to be investigated.
Okay, I would just hope that what was shown on these plans doesn't limit, future development potential of the park. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We have a question from Kronzer, or that was taken care of? Okay, Commissioner Cohen.
Help me out on this, if you would, Hillary. I'm on page 36. It says the city of Minneapolis will eventually purchase the land for the public park. Have we formally, actually, specifically agreed to do this, or is this still in the proposal stage? When you say will purchase, it suggests to me that some formal action has been taken. Has it been taken?
Not officially, no.
Okay. So that isn't quite, it's a proposal, but we have not specifically, as a city, agreed to this. Okay.
The city has not purchased the land yet, no.
I have one other, point rather than a question. I had not realized that the Star Tribune building itself was scheduled to be demolished for future use in connection with this. I hadn't read about it or anything like that. This is news to me, and I am surprised to see it. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions at this point? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll call on you again to clarify things later on. I will now open the public hearing. I'd like to hear from the applicant first, and I think we're understanding the project pretty well. You'll remember from our committee of the whole meeting, we were very concerned particularly about the park facade of the residential building on Block 75. We'd like to hear the measures you've taken to make that a bit more amenable to the public realm.
Well, thank you, Planning Commission, for having us. We'll address that. Hillary, do we have the PowerPoint? I think you captured that building that faces the park front is divided really into 3 individual buildings that are massed that way. Our thought was to locate nearest to 4th Street, a retail space that could be accessed with the street traffic there, so people could come and go conveniently, service could access. That becomes very difficult in the center of the block. We also think that's tough down at the side with the light rail. So that's why we proposed the retail on the north edge on 4th Street. And so it really sits within that first third of the mass. A few questions came out about the space, retail versus amenity. Our intention is to use it as commercial space. This is a new idea for us, so we certainly don't have a tenant, nor do we have tenants for any of our commercial space. So that's something that we will work toward. We don't know what that will be, but it could certainly be a bar, a restaurant, and many of those things would serve as an amenity to the residents upstairs and in the building. So that's why that's labeled retail/amenity space, because we're going to try to find something that's compatible.
So you're looking for something that the public can come into or serve
Yeah,
the public?
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that Spoon River is about 2,200 square feet.
The tattoo
that's
parlor,
bigger
for
than a
instance.
coffee shop, that sort of thing. Okay, just some of the quick highlights. I think we've all been through this, but it's, I think, helpful just to reiterate. 1,002,000 square feet of office that we're proposing, 2 17-story buildings, capacity of about 5,000 to 6,000 employees to the area. 28,000 square feet of retail. This is something that we're quite sensitive to because this area is devoid of any retail. And for us to go out there, it's a big risk for us, even at that 28,000 square feet, which is quite a bit more than is out there today. 200 residential units are part of Phase 1, and those are the 3 buildings, the park building, the 2 buildings that face the park attached to the Wells Fargo project. And then a second phase would happen on the north. And then it's a 1,600 square stall parking garage, the 4.2 acre green space, and then the Skyway connection, of course. And we've just highlighted the tax increases there from the project. So we have ran our video with the park building in it. I think the video is helpful because it's such a large development. So I'll run that for just a few minutes here. I'll try to narrate as we go through. Now everyone cross your fingers. Oh, maybe we won't. We'll give it one more try. I don't think our video is going to work, so I'm going to click through and toggle through some of the graphics here. Existing condition as it is today. There is the plan with the streets, of course, going through the building, just highlighting the different sections in a bit more of a graphic way and how they relate to the stadium. So you can see there, Commissioner Slack, the surface lot you were referencing earlier. So that's where our project really ends, and beyond that is property that we are not in control of. There's the view of what the property looks like today. And then, of course, you can see the park being inserted. These renderings don't have the park building in them. I'll show the ones that do. Those are later additions. There's your winter view of that same. And then here's the view from essentially the lip of the Metrodome today. And then you're looking out over the light rail stays intact. Of course, we're taking many liberties with the park here just for rendering's sake. But the Park Public Realm Committee will ultimately be the authority that goes through the process of implementing that. This rendering, you can see we've added the park building to, so you can get a sense of the scale in the background. And then that's where you can see those 3 masses, the right mass of which would have the retail space. There are just our park comparables, and we've shown these many times to this group. There again is a better shot of the scale and massing of that use. What we think is important is we have all active uses on the park front, that retail, the lobby, some of the amenity space, and then of course units with patios, real front door presence on the park. And that's a view of Fifth Avenue with that park building. And there's just a shot of the, this was submitted, and I believe it's in the packet, of that retail space and how it would interact with that sort of north edge of the park. And it would be in this building on the right, the cream-colored building, and that would be complementary to the other retail spaces. So you'd have three that really work in tandem there. And there's that space in plan, as Hillary pointed out. We're happy to answer any questions, but before we do that, I want to walk through briefly the signage that we already touched on, and just highlight that the two main areas that we are concerned with and maybe disagree with the staff report and would like to ask for reconsideration are of the signage that faces north toward the river. That's in the same location as the south facing, so it's that signage. We find several precedents of non-primary walls that have signage that are that size in the city. The Doubletree Hotel, the Old Spaghetti Factory, the Hyatt, the Holiday Inn, Center Village are a few of those examples. So there's a precedent set for that. Also, the intention of our design is not that this is a non-primary wall, as we fully intend to build a 5-story building onto the back of this, and it will have a real presence. It's not as if it faces an alley. So it'll be an outwardly facing wall and sign. The roof signage is another area that we would ask for reconsideration from the commission. And this is the size of the roof signage. I think it's important to point out it's about half the size that was formerly submitted and requested or shown to the committee of the whole. The signage, as we read the zoning code, speaks to rooftop signage and signage that would be affixed or mounted to the roof. To us, that sounds like it's referencing a billboard that's being placed on the roof, not something that is actually lays flat on the roof structure. A few precedents of that: the Metrodome itself currently has Mall of America signage on its rooftop. Also, the signage at the Target Plaza Commons, which is on the basketball court, faces upward, is a very similar setting where many other buildings look down at that. So those are a few precedents that we pull out and would just offer up for discussion. Before I go on to a few of the other areas we have that we would like to ask for reconsideration, I want to introduce Brent Hansen of Wells Fargo, and I think Brent can offer a unique perspective on the signage.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. Again, my name is Brent Hansen with Wells Fargo. I'm a Vice President of Real Estate there. First of all, thank you to Hillary and the staff for the hours of work put in on this report. I'd first like to say we agree with the majority, obviously, of the recommendations. I'm here specifically to talk about the conditions of approval related to the signage package, not just the rooftop signage, but also, as Mike indicated, the north building signage. As you know, Wells Fargo and the city have had opportunities to work together in the past, including the Minneapolis Home Mortgage campus in South Minneapolis, related to, and you've seen the signage on that building as well. We've been working with the city and with Ryan for about the last year, and with the city since July, when our original signage package was submitted. We've gone forward with Ryan with the expectation and the assumption that our signage package would move forward as we had submitted it. In fact, it's so important to Wells Fargo, we have put a contingency of the deal that we need to get that signage package approved. The reasons for that are multiple. We're investing over $300 million on the east side of downtown. We'll be building 1 million square feet out of office space for approximately 5,000 to 6,000 employees. And we believe that's a reasonable expectation for us to be allowed this type of signage. I understand it's unique, but I also feel that the area that we're building in is unique. It's an opportunity for us, and one of the reasons we're in this area of town is because of the unique, vibrant, and active environment that's going to be around it and that Ryan is proposing. This is a factor that's important to Wells Fargo, and we hope the Commission will take it into consideration as we move forward through the process. Any questions?
I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. I'll wrap up quickly and then offer up any questions that are there. The only other items that we disagree with, and again, we thank Hillary for her work on the report. It's very thorough and it's a lot of development, certainly. The other would be item number 2 on page 38, and this is talking about the commercial, residential, office, hotel uses being included along Chicago Avenue as part of the initial construction of the above-ground parking structure. We would just like to present that this is not really our decision to make. This is the MSFA's in the city as the owners of that ramp. So the decision to include development there of retail will really be determined by the development rights for that block, and that's not something that Ryan is in control of at the moment. So we can't speak necessarily toward that and offer that up. The last was I just wanted to touch on the rain gardens, and those are only proposed on the park side, or on the north side, the development side of the park, not on the park side at this moment. So that's it. We'll open it up for
Okay, I think
questions.
Commissioner Walensky has a question, and Commissioner Cohen.
Mr. Ryan, could you tell me when you demolish the buildings and leave this block and 3/4 for a public park at some time in the future to be purchased by the city of Minneapolis, what will be under that sod or seed?
So when the buildings are demolished, we would take out the building remains and replace that with soils that are appropriate to be planted for a park on top of. And we would restore that that's the basic level that you could plant seed on. And then what is put on top of that is really up to the Public Realm Committee that's been assembled.
And will there still be the sidewalk all the way around the block, or is that also being demolished as part of this? So there will be...
We will leave some of the sidewalk around the blocks, and we will replace some where it needs to be replaced, certainly where curb cuts are, that sort of thing.
Okay.
The thought is that the park is improved in tandem with this whole project, so it all opens at once, and all the sidewalks are rethought in a comprehensive way as part of the Public Realm Committee that's been established to lead the design of that park. So my hope is that what is out there today and sort of this idea that just the basic park would get built is not ultimately what happens. It's that this park is there and active and very comprehensive and designed with intent. That's what our retail spaces are going to face onto. That's what our residents are going to face onto, and that's Wells Fargo's front door. So we have a very vested interest in this being a great park.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have Commissioner Cohen and Commissioner Kronzer.
In our description of the parking ramp or parking spaces, we state there will be 1,625 parking spaces in the garage, which will be used in conjunction with activities taking place at the new Minnesota Multipurpose Stadium. I'm looking at the downtown east descriptions of the parking spaces. Does it describe the parking spaces in the same terms as an amenity, amenity for the stadium, or does it describe it as an amenity for the housing and office spaces that you're building? Or does it describe it in both terms? I want to be sure that I understand what the description of what this use will be is consistent between the city and your organization.
Those discussions are ongoing and have been for quite some time. They are consistent. The parking space will be used by the NFL and by the Vikings on game day. many of the spaces, those that sort of meet a certain level of classification that are appropriate for that. Other days of the year, they will be used to support the retail functions and the general community, Wells Fargo certainly, and others.
Does your description in the Downtown East materials state something like that?
I can't say with certainty that it does, but that's our intention.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Kronzer?
Thank you, President Tucker. I have a question about sidewalk width. Can you walk us around,
Yeah.
the front of the mixed-use buildings, around the residential building in the park? Curious to get a sense on actual clear widths of sidewalks.
So the sidewalks that you're seeing there on 4th Street that would face the park, in front of the residential building, we have about a 14-foot right-of-way to the property line. That's already a pretty robust sidewalk. We're adding another 12 feet to that. So some of that area will be taken up by front patio for those residential units that Hillary described. Others would be set back for full seating widths. So right in front of that residential building, you'll have a sidewalk that's wider than what you experience on most parts of Nicollet Mall. So that's going to be very compatible for outdoor dining, that sort of thing.
Is that
in the
the
retail
14
spaces.
feet?
What's that?
Is that the 14 feet?
24 feet, so it'll be an additional 12. And then as you get in front of the plaza, that sets back an additional 20, 25 feet. I'm not sure the actual dimension, but it's a quite large plaza and actually meets the definition of a PUD plaza. So that would be in front of both of the tower entries for the office space. So that's in these locations here. Sorry if you cannot see that cursor. And then we would expect with that liner pad in front of the ramp that would carry that same line. But of course, it doesn't necessarily have to. It could extend out those extra 12 feet.
That same 24 feet?
Yep.
Okay.
We would expect that, but that's up to the development that's ultimately there. Mm-hmm. And then a typical sidewalk width in front of the Park Residential building as you face 5th Avenue. We've set back, I think it's about 3 to 4 feet extra there, and that's to allow for those walk-ups that we've shown on 5th Street.
Right, so is that sidewalk or is that landing space for the stairs?
It's landing space for the stairs.
So the stairs
Yep.
are in that 3 feet.
So your sidewalk, you'll still have that sort of 12-foot section there. And then in addition to that, the building's set back about 4 feet from the property line.
Yeah. And what about on 4th Street and 5th Street?
So on 4th Street, you have, you're talking on the ends, the short ends of the residential. So the 4th Street side would mirror what's going on the other side of the block. I don't know if that full 12 feet is experienced there, but it's intended to be sort of a framed entryway to the park. So you'd have a very similar experience, and the south side facing the Armory would extend close to the property line, much like 5th Avenue does. So about 3 or 4 feet set back for those landings.
And one of the landscape drawings shows landscaping between the building and the sidewalk, and also there's a stair exposed on 5th Street as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? I don't see any.
Well, let me just do this one last.
A question?
One. Yes, it's a question. Why would Ryan and the Minnesota Sports Facility be negotiating a deal involving the purchase of land from a third party, the Star and Tribune? Why isn't the Star and Tribune a participant in that negotiation?
Mr. President, Commissioners, my name is Rick Collins, Vice President of Development with Ryan. Ryan Companies has a fully executed purchase agreement with the Star Tribune that provides a very specific price and terms and conditions and a closing date of December 27th with the Star Tribune. And we are proposing a specific set of terms to the MSFA for their purchase of the block based upon our agreement with the Star Tribune. So the Star Tribune was a party in an agreement with us. We now have control of that site through our purchase agreement, and we're negotiating with the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority.
And that will determine the price the Star and Tribune pays for the property?
No. The Star Tribune is the current owner, and we have a purchase price that we will pay that is fixed based on our purchase agreement with them.
But it's contingent, isn't it?
When you say it's contingent, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, it's contingent on the deal going through in some
is correct.
fashion. Okay.
That is correct. So,
Okay.
and yet the purchase price is fixed. So the contingency is whether or not the whole development proceeds.
Right.
If it does not proceed, we are not obligated to purchase the Star Tribune land. And yet, if we do purchase it, we know exactly the terms under which we will, and that has allowed us to negotiate the terms with the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority.
By the Star and Tribune is contingent upon the deal eventually. Right?
Yes, consistent with. Yes,
Thank you.
it is.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's continue with our public hearing. Anyone else wishing to speak on this matter, please come forward. Give your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is David Thede, and I'm a owner and resident at American Trio Lofts at 250 Park Avenue. It looks like there's a few of us here tonight. We don't have any coordinated effort as far as I know. I emailed this document to Hillary yesterday, and she was gracious enough to include it in your 450-page packet. So you have it if you look for it. Basically, my observations and ideas are covered in there. I just want to point out a couple major points. First point is just that Minneapolis doesn't have a stellar history of preserving historic buildings in Minneapolis, not when you look back a ways. I think I'm safe in assuming none of you were on the commission back in the 60s when so many buildings were destroyed. But and certainly the record has improved immensely in recent history, and I would just like to see that continue. We have a situation here where I just want to make sure we don't move away from treating historic buildings the way they should be treated and ignoring them. One other observation is that there are a number of pedestrian barriers around the development we're talking about here. We have, just so you have some reference to look at, we have HCMC to the south. A lot of city documents refer to that as a pedestrian barrier just because there's no real human-scaled or inviting aspects of the building at the street level. We also currently have that situation with the Metrodome. Certainly the new stadium looks like will go a long way towards correcting that, as long as we don't have a lot of above-ground parking structures right around it. And then the third barrier is on the west side, and that is the mega parking structures that are all along Fifth Avenue there. I was glad to see the change of adding the residential building on the west end of the park. I think that's a big improvement as far as the park is concerned for really making the pedestrian pathways to downtown more pedestrian friendly. What I would like to see is that we also work on making pedestrian pathways to the Mill District and the neighborhood where me and several other people here live. And with that in mind, there it is. This is just a photograph I took myself, undoctored in any way except for the addition of the iron gateway. Just wanted to present the idea of providing a gateway from the stadium and park development into the Mill District. And I'm just making a case for Park Avenue being the best choice there, because we have two 100-year-plus buildings on the corner of Park and 3rd. So they kind of form a gateway in themselves with very little additional work. In order to accomplish this, though, it'd certainly be nice to have what we're talking about backed off a little bit from Park Avenue to make it a view that pedestrians in the park or coming from the stadium can see there's a pathway for them to another neighborhood. And I feel this would benefit both the new development and the Mill District. Where things are at today, if it's too late to move the multi-use buildings away from Park Avenue, I would at least like to see, well, my first choice would be that the parking garage we're discussing is totally below ground level. An alternative to that is certainly that it, from the outside, be a building with purpose. I'm glad to hear that there is a requirement that it be built to allow for future build-out of commercial space at the street level. And I also would propose that the initial development being either along Park or 3rd would be preferable to Chicago Avenue. Finally then, just one interesting point I came across this morning. Both buildings, as I said, are 100-year plus. The building we all live in was built in 1910. This is normally referred to as the Thresher Square building and typically listed as 1902.
Is this building visible from your gateway that you're talking about?
Yes, this is the building.
Because I don't see the connection to our project. You're trying to talk about moving the buildings further apart.
I'm going to give some of the historic aspects.
We're not the HPC, so thank you. I did have a question. How far apart did you want these buildings moved? More than the other buildings in your gateway picture?
You mean away from Park Avenue?
Yeah. Did you just say enough or something?
Yeah, I guess I would leave that up to the experts, but certainly
okay, just curious.
Wider than.
But the view is open anyway, even as it's proposed right now.
What?
The view is open as proposed right now. You just want it a little more expansive.
Narrow, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else, please come on up and speak to the proposal in front of us.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Hello, my name is Frank Janes. I am a resident of 250 Park Avenue, American Trio Lofts Building. And I wanted to make some comments. I appreciate the presentations from staff and Ryan, and this is a bold, adventurous project that I think is going to do a lot for the area. And in general, I think it's a good thing for the area. However, as a member of really the only residential building that's being impacted at all, we have certain concerns of the building that I wanted to just bring up here. The first I'd heard tonight, which is a good thing, that I heard there's a shadow study that was done. One of the concerns from a lot of the residents in our building is with these two very large buildings going right across the street, throwing shadows on the American Trio building. And I had not heard that there's a shadow study. I would certainly I wonder how that would be available to take a look, because our residents would like to know, given the times that were studied, and I don't know if there are photos or graphics that show that. If we could have access to that, that would be great.
Yeah, staff can provide that.
And I also wonder if there was any something looked at with, we have a rooftop deck that's utilized by all of our 90 condominium owners that has a pretty spectacular view of downtown now, and there is a lot of concern of how much that view is going to be impacted, what a little bit, a lot, or completely. That would be something that I would like to see, and our residents would like to see, how these two new buildings impact the view looking, which would be pretty much south or west-southwest to downtown, if that is available, or if I could speak with somebody from Ryan or the city about that. we would like to see that. Obviously, those are two major factors that impact our building, the shadowing, and then and its impact on views and light and circulation around that area. Additionally, it seems that a lot of attention for this development has been paid to the area facing 4th Street in the park, and whereas the impact on 3rd Street has been sort of taking a back seat to that, and I know that the third of the blocks on the facing 3rd Street on the two mixed-use buildings have a planned residential component that, from staff, I understand, may be put forth formally to the city very soon, so we'll be looking to see that. But I would just caution the commission and the city to that Third Street needs as much attention as 4th Street does, and certainly we're going to have a great amenity with the stadium and the park there, and we want that to look nice, and we want that to be vibrant and active and safe. I think we want the exact same thing for 3rd Street, and we need to give that the attention that it's due. And right now we're going to have a seeded lot with a sidewalk and a big blank wall, and hopefully a proposal is coming for that residential soon, but that's not, who knows, and I think that needs to be looked at, and some considerations need to be taken of what's going to happen on 3rd Street there for the next month, year, or 10 years, depending on what happens with that proposed residential development, is what is going to be put in place so that just doesn't become a little bit of a wasteland along 3rd Street. Similarly, the parking structure that's proposed along 3rd Street just to the west, closer to the new stadium, I like the addition of the commercial residential on the corner of Chicago and 4th, but again, what is 3rd Street? What's going to happen there? We have a living wall there, and I think the recommendations of staff to enhance that are good, and we have the potential, and I emphasize potential, for future commercial retail uses along 3rd Street that would take the place of some of that parking on the ground floor, but as of right now, it's going to be dark and nobody using it at night. And are there any mandates on when that has to be used for potential future commercial retail, or could it go on forever and never be utilized like that? I understand market forces are very key to that, but it's one thing to say, well, it could be used that way in the future, and then 10, 20 years from now, it's not. I'm just wondering what mechanisms are in place that needs to be utilized by a particular time or a particular percentage, because just saying it has to be doesn't mean it's going to happen ever.
Mm-hmm. I think we get your point there.
Okay. Yeah. Finally, I guess I'll leave it at that. It's just the pedestrian impact and vibrancy of this development needs to be looked at on all sides of the development, and I just feel that, and a lot of people I've talked to feel that there's a lot more emphasis on what's happening on 4th Street than what's happening on 3rd Street, and we ask the city to consider that equally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Come on up. Give your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Graham Webster, and just like two before you, I live at 250 Park Avenue, American Trio, Lofton. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will talk just briefly about my position on one of the items that you guys had tonight, specifically around the signs facing South 3rd Street, the mixed-use buildings. I just want to say I support the findings from the CPED to say that those should not be allowed. They do face historical districts. They do face historical buildings, which was the proof, or which was the reason for not to include those or not to allow those exemptions. I didn't hear anything really from Wells or from Ryan to say they were addressing the fact that the true purpose of the denial was about where they were facing and what were they adding to the environment. It was more about giving them a new opportunity in this space, in this new neighborhood, which I do appreciate, to come to the neighborhood and give that. So it's just more about addressing the true purpose of the denial of those two signs to the South 3rd Street. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this? I'm pleased to hear the neighborhood people here. I hope as we look at the 3rd Street side that you continue your engagement and offer your advice. I don't see anyone else, so I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, we have 3 applications, a CUP for the planned unit development, a site plan review, and a plat. So, do we have thoughts on this? Commissioner Cohen.
Well, I'm going to support this. I think it's a healthy project for the city of Minneapolis, and I think this will be, in the long run, a major addition to our downtown area. I would like to make one comment, though, about the nature of the underlying nature of the proposal. It's not our business to go into the financing of this. We don't deal with those particular subjects, but that's the elephant in the living room. And the irony of this whole thing is that we have a major player in this is the Minneapolis newspaper, which ironically is the most secretive institution that I have ever encountered in the long history of institutions which I've encountered. And the irony is that it's a newspaper, which isn't supposed to have that kind of public attitude. But be that as it may, the project itself is worthy of our support. I think it'll make a great contribution to the city, and I'm pleased to vote for it.
Okay, could we actually have a motion? Commissioner Slack, did you want to move the staff recommendation?
Well, I'd like to make the motion.
It has 12 conditions as recommended by the staff at this point.
You've taken the words out of my mouth, Mr. President. I move the staff recommendation with the 12 conditions as set forth by the staff.
Okay, may I have a second? Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion on this. We have Commissioner Slack, then Commissioner Walensky, Commissioner Kronzer.
I guess my question is more of a point of clarification, again, related to the CUP and item number 2. I think Mr. Ryan made a comment regarding item number 2 as it relates to a new commercial residential office hotel use at the corner of Chicago and 4th, and the fact that Ryan doesn't have development rights, so we're recommending that they develop.
That's our recommendation. It's a tricky area given the stadium legislation that was drafted, and that this block is subject to because it is stadium related infrastructure. I guess from the staff perspective, we felt though that the condition was warranted given our policy language, and that as the development moves through construction drawings and the negotiations between all the parties, which the city is a part of, continue and obviously conclude that this would be made part of those agreements. Notwithstanding any of that, we do, however, recognize that the stadium legislation can trump this condition of approval.
Okay, I have Commissioner Walensky, then Kronzer, then Schiff.
I'd like to propose a little bit different wording for item 8 and item 10.
Item 8.
As for condition number 8, I would like it to read: a portion of the plantings used in conjunction with the living wall system on the above-ground parking garage shall provide greenery year-round if possible.
You're adding if possible?
Yes, I'm really racking my brain, and I'm not coming up with something that's going to grow vertically, that's going to stay green 365 in this climate. And then item number 10, I'd like it to read: the land that will be developed as a public park shall be seeded or sodded in high-quality organic soil of a depth of no less than 6 inches.
Okay, we have 2 amendments to the recommended conditions. Do I have a second on those?
Second.
Okay.
And an amendment, a friendly amendment.
Do you want to suggest a different wording?
Just if I could make the amendment that makes it clear that with the vines, whatever gets used, that per final staff approval, that we just add that in the final sentence.
Yeah, I think we would add our work with staff too.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Any comments on the soil depth and quality? Okay, all in favor of adding those phrases to conditions 8 and 10, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those are modified slightly. Now let's see, who do we have? Kronzer.
I too think this is a good development. There's lots of great things in this project. They're taking on quite a bit of risk here. I appreciate the retail space and the mixed-use buildings be able to convert between residential and commercial and let the market kind of figure that out to have active uses on that street. The one area I think needs a little more attention are the sidewalks on 4th and 5th Street at the residential building in the park. The site plan that I have here shows approximately a 10-foot sidewalk on both 4th and 5th with additional 5 feet on 4th Street and a stair protruding into that additional 5 feet on 5th Street. If we look at the jail across 5th Avenue, that sidewalk is 23 feet in width. If we go west to City Hall, it's even greater than that. When light rail was built on 5th, the north side of 5th Street, the sidewalk was increased. I think it's 20 feet or more from 5th Avenue all the way into Nicollet Mall, maybe up to Marquette. So I would propose that we have a minimum of 20 feet of sidewalk on both 5th and 4th at this building. I know it could impact the unit count in the building and probably the parking count as well, but given the fact that the park is directly adjacent to this building and 5th Street is a very active pedestrian street, certainly game days and if not more, I think having a slightly wider sidewalk at these locations is required.
And that would be measured from the current curb line?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so you don't know how far, in addition, they have to set it back. But. Okay, I'm just trying to be as specific as we can. So you want to add that as a condition? Would that go into the site plan review more? Could be either, okay. So you would add a condition that the sidewalks on either side of the residential building of Block 75 must be at least 20 feet measured from the current curb. Okay? Do I have a second? Yeah.
For clarification, is that 4th Street and 5th Street or 4th Street and 5th Avenue? Okay.
The streets. Jason, Jeff? We certainly can. Let's see if we get a second before we go forward with that. Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? We might want to find out the impact that would have on the current proposal in front of us.
Thank you for the opportunity. Again, Mike Ryan, Director of Architecture and Engineering at Ryan. The widening of the sidewalks, I'd ask for a couple of considerations. Number one, residential uses. Really, they almost demand, if you're going to have street level units, that you have a landscape buffer. So that landscape buffer is going to be very important, and that's included in the design now. Any extension into that would ask that sidewalk had to be there, I think would be preclusive of having that residential buffer, that landscape buffer for those residents to feel comfortable. So that's the first thought. The second is that, we've gone through what I would say great lengths is to try to provide maximum sidewalk widths where we thought it most important, and we've worked with the committee of the whole to get there. Those are two areas where we've tried to take lesser area from the park to drive a unit count in a project that made sense. Decreasing those areas, I would say, is it could be very problematic for us when we don't understand the repercussions of that at this moment. So it's something that I would ask consideration if that's been a precedent that has been looked at other projects and sort of required of other projects. And then to, again, recognize where we have widened sidewalks, to 24 feet and really gone to great lengths to provide a better public realm there. So that's our thought on that issue. Any follow-up questions?
As it's currently proposed, how far between the curb line and your building?
Dan,
do you happen to know?
Yeah. 17 feet.
So you have 17 feet in there right now.
Yeah.
Those are 10-foot sidewalks.
So that our setback from the property line is that landscape buffer that I'm talking about. So if you add that to the 10-foot sidewalk, 15 feet. Right. So 15 to 17 is where we think we're at
So
today.
your proposal would move the buildings at least another 10 feet, do you suppose?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Any other questions to help us figure this one out? Other discussion? Thank you. Any other discussion on the amendment to add the condition? Let's see who's in favor of widening the sidewalks to 20 feet. All those say aye. 2, is that? And opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
1, 2. Can we have hands just so I can? In favor of the amendment? 1, 2. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that fails. Thank you. Commissioner Schiff now.
I didn't vote against that motion because I'm against wide sidewalks. I do want to know, however, more the impact on the site plan review before we take such a large action. And I'm wondering if there's some other action we can take to ensure that there's adequate pedestrian space without setting, picking a number out of the air. And I don't know if staff has any suggestions and any suggested sidewalk minimum space that we should perhaps put into writing.
Commissioners, I'll defer to Ms. Dvorak on whether she has specific recommendations.
I mean, cutting 5 to 10 feet out of the middle of the building, I don't know if that would reduce it by that number of units on that many, on all of the floors, or if you would go from a 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom or something like that. The Downtown East North Loop Master Plan does have a minimum sidewalk width of 10 feet, and I do agree that wider sidewalks downtown are, that we should have wider sidewalks downtown. The guidance is a minimum of 10 feet, however. When I looked at the elevations, we have just about 11 feet on 5th Street, 11 feet on 5th Avenue, and I didn't see a good number on 4th Street, but it looks about comparable to 5th Street, so maybe just about 11 again. The building is set back between 5 and 7 feet on 4th and 5 feet on 5th Streets. Those areas, however, are used to either access the doorways, obviously, or then for increased sidewalk width, or landscape buffer around the edges. And so, I don't know if the applicant would, where you could probably get wider sidewalk. And I'm just going to throw this out, and hopefully this can be a dialogue and not just me coming up with something, but. This is the entrance to the building, and there isn't and this didn't get updated to reflect the entrance into that retail space. One area to get a wider sidewalk where you're hopefully going to have, where we're going to be attracting more people because of the retail would be here, and maybe although, I personally like landscaping along the edges of buildings, but you could lose the landscaping here and have just a wider sidewalk, some kind of decorative sidewalk, and then your clear unobstructed zone would be just about 15 to 17 feet, or you could cut that landscaping in half and you could, kind of cut the difference there and have about 13 feet, 14 feet. There's a little notch here. That's where it's 5, and then the rest of the building is about 7 feet back. So I would let the applicant speak to that. On 5th Street, then, this is a 5-foot green space. Here, you do have residential units at the edge of that building, unlike the lobby and retail at 4th Street. I guess that wasn't really a suggestion. I'm just walking you through the building in a little bit more detail.
We'll see if that notion surfaces again when we get to site plan review. Commissioner Schiff, did you have other comments on the CUP? Any other additions to the motion, which is staff recommendation plus a couple of wording changes on conditions 8 and 10. I would suggest one, just to clear up the confusion about, or possible confusion about amenity, just add a condition that the amenity as applied to that space at the corner of, what is that, 4th and 5th Avenue, amenity be a space regularly open to the public. Would that be acceptable? Yeah. Can I have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Commissioner Schiff again?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. On condition number 11, that roof signs shall be prohibited, I wasn't aware that our zoning code prohibited roof signs until this issue came up, and frankly, I don't have an objection, and I've talked with my colleagues. We don't have objections to the idea of a advertisement being viewable from a blimp, which is what this is all about. And at least it doesn't conflict with any urban planning policies that I'm aware of. So I think a code amendment may be coming to, because I don't think we should just approve this as presented. There's too many unintended consequences that can happen in different neighborhoods. If people are looking from one residential building down in another residential building and they're staring at an advertisement, I can understand how that would affect particularly height differences between commercial and residential buildings in parts of downtown. So I think we need to do this thoughtfully and carefully and introduce a code amendment that sets some parameters for it. That's not here today. But I would like to strike number 11 because I think should the code amendment pass, the applicants can come forward with a new proposal when these are expressly permitted by our zoning code. And I wouldn't want to have this embedded into these approvals, and it can't be undone at a future time as a result. Does that make sense?
But it is part of their proposal right now. So if we approve the CUP without speaking to those signs, they are approved, are they not?
I don't think so. I think our staff has interpreted the plans correctly and that our code does prohibit these signs without us restating it as a condition of approval. But I'll defer to Mr. Wittenberg.
I would agree with
okay,
Schiff
so
that regardless of whether it's a condition here, we still have the ordinance language that addresses it, and subject to a potential future amendment that would perhaps determine whether the applicant has to come back for this application as well.
So striking condition 11 does not approve the signs.
Correct.
Okay.
It just doesn't embed a denial in the case that in the future that it would be permitted.
So you have a motion to strike 11?
That's my
Do we have a
motion.
Second? Okay, further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, so we strike that. We're back to 12 conditions. Any other thoughts on the conditions of the CUP? Okay, if not, clerk, please call a roll on item A, CUP for the PUD.
Brown? Aye. Cohen? Aye. Kronzer? Aye. Schiff?
Aye.
Slack? Aye. Walensky? 6-0.
Thank you. Okay, we move along to site plan review. Somebody want to move this one? Walensky? Commissioner Walensky? Okay, that's got 7 conditions to it. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion, Commissioner Kronzer?
Okay, let's try this one more time. I do agree, talking about the residential building in the park, the landscape area between the sidewalk and the building is very important for the commercial, for the residential pieces there. It's really 5th Street that I have a very, very serious concern that we're creating a bottleneck. Game days, people like to ride the train into downtown. We're going to have another line up here in another couple of months. Southwest might get up, might bring Vikings fans from Southwest Metro into downtown. We have currently a large warehouse district that supports pregame and postgame activities for football fans. Those trains running through downtown will be full. There will not be access for people to get on those trains to go from the warehouse district to the new stadium. So people will be on the street, and they'll be on 5th Street. And we're providing a bottleneck here on 5th Street on the north side. We've got very wide, 20-foot wide sidewalks coming up to this point, which will be neck down, call it 12, 10 feet, whatever the current design is. And I think that's a problem. So I would propose on 5th Street only that we have a minimum of 20 foot of sidewalk, and then whatever landscape barrier that the applicant chooses to install is great. But That would be an additional number 8 condition that I'm proposing at this point.
And do you want that sidewalk to be in addition to the buffer between the sidewalk and the dwellings, or it can be handled anyway?
Back of curb to back of sidewalk.
Back of curb to back of sidewalk. Then the building, wherever.
Whatever else is beyond that.
Okay. So we're suggesting in condition 8, 20-foot sidewalk on 5th Street only. Okay, did we get a second on that? We have a second. Discussion? Any additional thoughts on why we'd do this? Is slightly extraordinary, so I think I heard the expected heavy foot traffic, which is a pretty good reason right there. We are, after all, putting in a stadium with thousands of people coming to it. Commissioner Slack.
I agree with Commissioner Kronzer. I think during some of the conversations that we had with Ryan at Cal, we had a lot of concerns about how to deal with that end of the park and to activate the uses at the end of the park, and that's still, to me, a question that hasn't been answered, and subsequently it's not going to be answered by Ryan, it's going to be answered by the Park Implementation Committee and those individuals. And honestly, going to games, 5th is what we use. People walk up and down 5th because I think that they try to time access to light rails, try to time the stations, and so that is, I think, the busiest street for that kind of activity. And without having the opportunity to extend those active uses all the way up to 5th, I know there'll be residences and there'll be some amenity spaces. There needs to be another way to really enhance the public realm, and I think wider sidewalks will go to that point.
Okay, any other comment on that suggested condition number 8? Okay, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, I believe that passes. So that can get us back to our main motion. Any other comments on the site plan review with now 8 conditions? Seeing none, clerk, please call a roll.
Brown, Cohen, Kronzer, Schiff, Slack, Walensky, 6-0.
Thank you. And I will move the plat item C. I can have a second. Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Oh, no, I guess we have to do the clerk on this one too. Thank you.
Makes me feel important. Thanks.
Thank you.
Brown, Cohen, Kronzer, Schiff, Slack, Walensky, 6-0.
Thank you. That concludes item number 7. Thank you for your attention.